British survey ship Bransfield arrives at the edge of the remote Brunt ice shelf in the Antarctic. On board are stores for the research station at Halley, a tiny outpost that has kept a constant watch on Antarctica's upper atmosphere for more than 30 years. Along a makeshift ice road, a yearly resupply operation begins. Fuel, food, building supplies, and complete laboratories are brought out of the ship's hold. Snowcats, the workhorses of Antarctic transport for over 3 decades, are lowered to begin the task of ferrying equipment across the sea ice. It's an 8-mile journey to Halley, and everything to keep its research staff alive and working for a whole year has to be moved across the ice in this one visit. Everything often means the materials to rebuild the base itself, because Halley is constructed on the surface, but is gradually buried beneath the crushing and steadily shifting ice sheet. The base has had to be abandoned and rebuilt 4 times since it was established in 1956. The sheer cost of keeping Halley going is enormous. It is the most remote British base in the remotest and most unforgiving continent. But today, despite the cost, Halley has proved beyond doubt the value of science in a continent that is still relatively free from the ecological damage wreaked on the rest of the planet. At the British Antarctic Survey headquarters in Cambridge, Joe Farman has been studying stratospheric ozone data collected from Halley over 30 years. Decades of detailed research were to lead to the discovery that finally shook man's environmental complacency: the ozone hole that forms each spring over Antarctica. The hole in the Antarctic sky is now part of the common currency of environmental catastrophe and represents the clearest early warning of the threat of global ozone thinning.
We've been measuring ozone in Antarctica since the International Geophysical Year in 1957, in fact, and for about the first 20 years of that, up to about 1977, things just seemed to be fairly straightforward and going without very much change. And then by 79, it was fairly obvious that things were moving, but still not in any big way. And the problem with this is we were the one station in the world which appeared to be seeing this, and so it was very difficult to know whether it was our fault or whether it was the atmosphere's fault. It was perfectly clear that something very, very dramatic was happening.
What Farman and his colleagues had seen was soon dramatically confirmed by the American ozone monitoring satellite, Nimbus 7. These color-enhanced computer images revealed the worst ever recorded thinning of the ozone layer in the Antarctic spring of 1987. By the first week of October, the ozone hole, here in pink, opened up over most of the continent, exposing an area greater than the United States. More than half the total ozone over Antarctica was destroyed in 30 days. Protective ozone is as important to life on Earth as oxygen and water. It acts as a shield against the sun's deadly ultraviolet radiation. Yet world production of chlorofluorocarbons, the ozone-destroying CFCs, is still running at around 1 million tons a year. And some CFCs may not break down in the upper atmosphere until the beginning of the 22nd century. As ozone declines and more harmful radiation from the sun reaches us, skin cancer rates will start to climb.
Right, and how's this been feeling over the last few months?
That's okay.
It's been okay, hasn't it?
That process has already begun. Julie Secker, noticed a cancerous mole or melanoma on her chest just in time, and surgery saved her life.
Quite clear now. I'm really very
Joe Farman's discovery of the ozone hole in Antarctica has had a dramatic impact on people's awareness of the potentially fatal signs of skin cancer. But other insidious effects of the thinning ozone layer have yet to be fully calculated.
But you also have to remember that one photon, just one particle of light, is enough to cause a mutation or a death in any one cell. And if you start thinking in those terms, well, it's horrific. You can upset the whole immune system of the body. And this means we can't afford to put any more chlorine into the atmosphere, even in so-called safer substances. We really can't afford to put any more in until we've got rid of some of what's already there. We must start cleaning the atmosphere, not just holding things steady, but cleaning it.
King George VI ice shelf on the Antarctic Peninsula, and the other head of the environmental hydra, the greenhouse effect. The British field party is witnessing the death of a massive ice sheet. These scientists have been drilling into what should be solid ice and finding caverns of seawater.
Roger. Even before we get to sea level, we find this ice shelf is almost at 0 centigrade. The ice shelf is melting above sea level, and people have said before this sort of event is only likely to be a transitory feature and only an event which will occur in a time of climatic warming. And where we are sitting now is probably the most vulnerable part of the ice shelf, because beneath our feet here it's absolutely riddled with seawater. And if this warming trend continues, this ice shelf will, in this area, become too rotten to sustain itself. And already in the last 40 years, this ice shelf has retreated about 30 miles from towards Cape Jeremy down to here. If the world climate gets warmer and warmer and the sea gets warmer and warmer, other ice shelves around the Antarctic may well have underneath them the same sort of warm water that this ice shelf has.
So the nightmare of a melting polar ice cap could soon be underway. The ice shelves around the continent act as a girdle, helping to hold in the massive weight of the polar ice cap itself. If the shelves become unstable, the ice cap could start a rapid advance into the oceans, where it would melt, pushing world sea levels up catastrophically.
If the entire ice sheet melted, then it would be something like 50 to 55 metres of sea level rise. That's unlikely to happen, but I think we expect quite reasonably a rise of about a metre with a doubling of the CO2 over the next 100 years or so. And we don't know that there may not be runaway effects, which would make that rather more.
As more carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are released into the atmosphere, scientists are trying to calculate what these runaway effects would mean. But even a rise of 1 metre would eliminate some low-lying countries completely.
We also can't allow the politicians to wait for us to have solved the problem before something's done. We have to say that there's a possibility of very severe change and that they should act on the worst possible scenario.
In recent years, Antarctica has been the exclusive preserve of the scientist. An entire continent turned over to a unique international cause, a better understanding of the world we live in.
Kill him back over there, and Pinheiro right over there to the left.
Antarctic science has provided powerful early warnings of our frightening capacity to overwhelm our own life support systems. But it has also been instrumental in uncovering the mysteries of Antarctica itself. What were its origins? And why should there be so much evidence of prehistoric life in the heart of a frozen continent? The trouble is, the answers to these mysteries have opened up Antarctica to a different kind of speculation. Does the ice conceal the world's greatest and last reservoir of untapped natural resources? No one really knows, but everyone is jumping to conclusions. Wellington, in New Zealand, May 2nd last year. delegates from the Antarctic treaty countries arrived to try and conclude an agreement to control future mining in Antarctica. Behind firmly closed doors, the treaty powers have to reconcile protecting the fragile environment with a growing pressure to anticipate future exploitation in the continent. Outside, conservationist groups are forced to wait and hope that the negotiations collapse.
World Park Antarctica!
But the hope begins to fade as seemingly intractable differences between the treaty powers start to fall away under pressure to reach agreement.
We had some tough sessions, but we knew we would. You don't, in some negotiations, get results until you've been at the negotiating table for a very long time.
He's concluding that the only way that an agreement will be reached is if the mining countries, the pro-mining countries, get their way, and that seems to be the line that the new draft has taken.
June the 2nd, and the negotiations succeed, but only just. Although a so-called minerals convention is adopted, the celebrations will prove to be short-lived. As the signing ceremony begins, environmentalists protesting outside are staring at bitter defeat. They had wanted Antarctica declared a world park, free from exploitation forever. But the Minerals Convention had attracted support notably from scientists as the best hope for securing a safe future for the continent. Now, though, there is dangerous uncertainty. In May this year, first the Australians, then the French, announced they won't ratify the convention. Australia's Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, now rejects the idea that the convention could protect the Antarctic environment.
Well, let me put it this way. It's very difficult to conceive of fully adequate protection of the environment under a convention which is a minerals convention. We thought that if your concern is the protection of that unique, pristine environment, then the concept of a minerals mining convention was not the appropriate way of going about achieving that objective.
In Britain, the government remains committed to the Minerals Convention and will join the other treaty states next month in Paris to press the Australians and the French to change their minds.
At the moment, we've got no internationally agreed system of protection or regulation against uncontrolled prospecting, exploration for and development of Antarctic minerals, and that's a very dangerous situation. And if we wait until somebody discovers or thinks they've discovered exploitable resources of minerals, it's going to be a great deal more difficult then to get international agreement on what is proposed to be the most stringent and rigorous system of control of mineral exploitation anywhere in the world.
The fact is that the weight of world opinion is accelerating, in my judgment, behind our position. That is that the Antarctic must be preserved completely free from mining activity.
40 miles off the coast of Rio de Janeiro, the Brazilians are claiming a world record. These platforms are working the oil fields of the Campos Basin, a vast reservoir in the deep waters of the southern Atlantic Ocean. A few years ago, oil production here was inconceivable. Now the Brazilians have developed a seafloor technology to operate at record depths of over 400 meters. The Brazilian oil giant Petrobras claims to be the biggest single company in the southern hemisphere. It is also claiming a technological lead in opening up the Antarctic as the last frontier of oil exploration.
I think there are not too many open areas for new ventures in the petroleum industry. And Antarctica is, no question, a new frontier area, and it's open in a great extent. So as we develop our ability to produce or to in difficult waters, I think would give us some lead in going to areas like Antarctica.
Petrobras have solved many of the technological problems of deep-water oil production by building simulators at their research base in Rio. But once the technology has passed the test in the Atlantic, Petrobras see direct applications in the much harsher environment of the waters surrounding Antarctica.
Well, we intend to develop the technology here in Brazil before that, because we already found some huge reserves in deep water. So we need to try the system here in a better environment before we try to apply the same system to Antarctica.
But you're fairly confident that if it works in deep water up to 1,000 meters or more off the Brazilian coast, that it will work in Antarctica as well?
For sure, for sure.
The Trans-Alaskan Pipeline, from Prudhoe Bay in the frozen north to Valdez in the south, and another landmark in the oil industry's capacity to operate in the most hostile environment. The 800-mile pipeline is a technological triumph over terrible Arctic conditions, and its success has encouraged new exploration. No one in the oil business underestimates the huge technological and economic doubts involved in future Antarctic oil production. The technology alone would have to meet still greater challenges than those found in Alaskan or Brazilian waters. But it isn't difficult to imagine what this new industry would look like.
The way I would foresee that it is done is really that presumably then have perhaps a floating production platform, and then you will have offshore loading maybe, or depending where you find it, it could be imagined that you bring it to the shore, or perhaps to a shallower water where you can have a concrete production platform, but then you load it on tankers and take it from there.
The Exxon Shipping Company are playing a deadly tug-of-war with an ever-spreading oil slick in Prince William Sound, and the company president...
But when the oil platforms and the tankers come, so too, eventually, will the accidents. The Exxon Valdez disaster in Alaska was the worst in American history, devastating wildlife and coastline over 1,500 square miles.
said it was as though the slick was moving down a superhighway. At this point, the beaches of 4 major islands have been fouled by oil.
New Zealand scientists have been trying to calculate the effect of a similar disaster in Antarctica by deliberately polluting tiny patches of coastline.
We've been monitoring these wee little plots for some years now, and the results are beginning to be quite disturbing for us anyway, and for many of our scientific colleagues, because quite simply they show the oil we added nearly 10 years ago is going to take at least 560 years to decompose. Now that's decompose, not to disappear.
The American base at Palma is near some of the most beautiful sea and landscape on the Antarctic Peninsula. As the winter sea ice clears away, the divers and scientists prepare to continue their work, studying the sea floor of the most pristine waters in the world. Nearby, a colony of Adelie penguins are at the start of their breeding season. The chicks will be venturing into the water within a few months. When these pictures were taken in January 1988, no one could have foreseen that this would be the site of Antarctica's worst ever pollution accident. In the same spot, exactly a year later, the Argentinian supply ship, the Bahia Paraíso, capsizes and spills thousands of gallons of fuel oil over 40 square miles. Scientists now have the unwanted opportunity to study the effects of pollution here firsthand. The question is now even more acute. Could full-scale oil production ever be safe in Antarctica?
We know from evidence all over the world, the historical evidence, past and present, that we do have accidents. How in God's name can we clean up an environment that we know is at least is totally wiped out for 600 years? Would we want to? Do we have a responsibility to do so? And would any oil company face that sort of liability?
Exploiting the Antarctic continent will present even tougher challenges. The ice cap is up to 14,000 feet, or nearly 3 miles deep. So mining would be limited to areas near the surface of the ice. But the strong suspicion that there are valuable minerals locked under the polar ice comes from all the evidence that 200 million years ago, Antarctica was part of Gondwana, a fragmenting supercontinent with mineral-rich regions that are now India, South Africa, South America, and Australia.
We would expect the same kinds of mineralization that we see in Central and Southern Australia to be also present in Antarctica. And the same is true in South Africa, and the same is true in South America, and probably true in India, because many of the mineral deposits we see in India are rather like the mineral deposits we see in Western Australia. So everything that we see about the geology of these other fragments of Gondwana land tell us that Antarctica should be a pretty rich plum if you can find those mineral deposits.
Chuquicamata, in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile, and the biggest open-cast copper mine in the world. Suggestive evidence for great mineral deposits in Antarctica is readily available from its continental neighbors. They are some of the most resource-rich countries in the world. Chile's high-grade copper accounts for over 40% of export earnings. And in this one country alone are a quarter of the Western world's identified copper reserves. Industrial complexes on this scale may not be coming to Antarctica yet. But the chances are that with the right price and the right technology, there could be a mineral that's valuable enough to a resource-hungry world for Antarctic mining to be viable. Behind the locked doors of these high-security vaults is the most expensive and strategically vital of all precious metals, platinum. The World Trade Center in New York, where the dealers in platinum futures have been experiencing record years. Demand for platinum has been outstripping supply since 1985. And last year, the deficit was greater than the 3 previous years combined. New demand stems from uses in computers and weapon systems and, ironically, in pollution control.
I think if one was to say that platinum is 55% an industrial metal, whereas gold on an equivalent basis is a 15% industrial metal, one also has to look at the kind of rates of supply that come out of the mines every year. Platinum, only 100 tons per annum, gold in the region of 1,600 tons per annum. So clearly platinum is much scarcer.
But platinum has one other important characteristic. Almost all of the world's supplies come from one country, South Africa. Martin de Wit, a South African-based geologist, believes the Gondwana theory points to a strong possible alternative source, Antarctica.
I really set up a model, a hypothetical model of where I might find a platinum deposit. And that was done on the following basis. Platinum occurs in very large mafic, ultramafic complexes. And the best example of that occurs in South Africa. It's called the Bushveld complex. And it contains the largest reserves and resources of platinum in the world. Now, a very similar igneous complex occurs in Antarctica called the Duvak Massif, the Duvak complex. It and the Bushveld complex are the two largest known complexes in the world, and that is by an order of magnitude bigger than the next biggest complex.
DeWitt's arguments are, at the moment, unproven. No one knows for sure whether large enough platinum deposits really do exist in Antarctica. But the reasons for speculating are clear enough. Platinum is a strategic metal. It is industrially vital, produced in tiny amounts, and virtually monopolized by a country whose political future is uncertain. If a significant alternative source can be found under the ice, the temptation to mine it may prove irresistible. Ralph Spencer, an economist from London's Royal College of Mines, has computed the potential for a viable platinum mine in Antarctica.
Well, taking the platinum price at the moment and assuming that that would continue to increase, which is one of the scenarios we looked at, then if there's a small real increase of platinum over a number of years, then it is marginally attractive proposition. If one puts a scenario in where something went wrong in South Africa and there was a large increase in the price of platinum, and then that platinum price started to fall away, then such propositions become economically feasible, and certainly companies would be interested in looking at that as a possible source of platinum.
So, who will lead the next wave of Antarctic exploitation? Amongst the strongest supporters of the Antarctic Mining Agreement have been the United States, Britain and West Germany. But one country above all has powerful reasons for seeking out a new source of raw materials: Japan.
You should understand that there is no single country in the world today that supplies all of its own mineral needs. Russia comes closest. But of the technologically developed countries, the one least capable of supplying its needs today is Japan. It has to bring everything in, and so it's not a matter of just looking at the countries that have large armies, large navies, and so forth. It's looking at the countries that actually have large consumptions of primary materials.
Behind the flashing neon and the glare of Tokyo's giant video screens lies the most dynamic economy in the world. Japan is the champion of technological sophistication in everything from cars to consumer electronics. As Japan's white-hot technological revolution gathers still more pace, factories like this one at Toshiba urge their workers to secure national prosperity with even greater productivity. But Japan's Achilles heel remains an almost total dependence on imported resources. Without them, the economy would grind to a standstill. At the powerful Ministry of International Trade and Industry, the watchwords are security of supply.
例えばその主要資源について見ますと、石油の輸入依存度は 99.7%、原料単では 96.5%、その他ニッケルですとか、鉄鉱石という金属鉱物資源についてもほとんど 100% がその輸入に頼っています。従いまして、日本としてはセキュリティの確保、さらには資源エネルギーコストの安定化という観点から安定的な資源の供給先を確保するということは極めて重要だというふうに認識しています。
But the most precious raw material of all is food. and the scarcity of food on land is the reason for Japan's massive harvest from the seas. This is Tsukiji, the biggest fish trading market in the world, supplying the bulk of Tokyo's 11 million population with their staple diet. The obsession with security of supply is the key to understanding why Japan persists with the most widely condemned of all its fishing practices, Antarctic whaling.
In Japan, because of the geographical condition that we are now living in, 2/3 of the land we possess are not suitable for grazing and agriculture. So we have always looked into the sea for the supply of the food. So to us, whaling is just the same thing as the grazing to you.
This, say the Japanese, is scientific whaling. They're in pursuit of the minke, the last species of krill-feeding whale that exists in the Antarctic in relative abundance. Commercial whaling is banned, but the Japanese carry on their scientific whaling around Antarctica because they believe they're investing in the future of a natural resource. If this is science, it's very expensive science. But it keeps alive a whaling fleet that otherwise would have disappeared. At the Whale Research Institute in Tokyo, this dish contains what the whaling fleet were ostensibly after, the tiny wax earplug from a minke. It is ringed like a tree trunk, so that the age of the whale is simply a matter of counting. The point of this, say the Japanese, is to estimate the abundance and age composition of minke whales in Antarctic waters. These tests are designed to support the call for a return to commercial whaling, not just around Antarctica, but wherever commercial catching is viable.
The minke whales in Antarctic is so abundant. But after that, in future, we are going to expand our activities to other area and to other species of whales.
The Greenpeace ship Gondwana breaks off from its support role in the campaign for a world park in Antarctica. Sailing for the open waters of the Southern Ocean, she is heading out to engage in a more familiar battle, hounding the whalers. Greenpeace employ two well-tried tactics. The whale catchers themselves are chased until they locate their prey. As they go in for the kill, inflatables are launched to block their line of fire. If that fails, attention is turned to the factory ship. Steaming only yards away from the stern, Gondwana hinders the whale catchers from landing their cargo of slaughtered minkies.
Well, this is what it's all about, dead whales. They say this is science, but in actual fact all it is a slaughter. All the big whales have gone, the humpback, the fin, the sei, the blue, and now the minkies are going. And we're here to stop this going on. We're here to show the charade of this slaughter dressed up as science. We've been here for 4 days, we've stopped them for 4 days, we've hurt them economically, and now we intend to stay longer. We intend to make sure that we really send the message home to Japan that we're not going to tolerate this.
As a result of Greenpeace's action, the target catch of 300 minkies falls short. 241 are dispatched for the attentions of Japanese science. An international ban on commercial whaling has transformed the status of whale meat in Japan. It is now considered an expensive and increasingly rare delicacy. The Japanese will continue to resist the anti-whalers, even though Western pressure to end Antarctic whaling may be close to success. But the real damage had already been done long ago in the West's own savage harvest of the great whales of Antarctica. The ghost towns of South Georgia's whaling industry lie ruined, not by environmentalist pressure, but by massive overexploitation. If anyone ever doubted that it was possible to have large-scale industry in or around Antarctica, they should look here. At its peak, 6 land stations, 21 factory ships, 62 catcher boats, the oil and baleen of up to 40,000 whales a year, serving the new consumers of the industrialized world. Away from the wreckage of a discredited industry, the next wave of Antarctic exploitation could soon gather an unstoppable momentum. If it is just a question of economics, the sheer cost of operating in the world's coldest continent could delay new industries for decades. But there is powerful evidence from the high Arctic that exploitation can begin even when the figures don't add up. What really matters isn't always profit, but strategic advantage. At the other end of the world, the Norwegian Arctic island of Spitsbergen has plenty of low-grade, uneconomic coal locked in narrow seams high on the mountainsides. And yet coal mining has gone on here since the turn of the century. Getting the coal out is expensive and very uncomfortable. These Norwegian miners are traveling to coal seams that are barely high enough to stand in. The seams at other mines are even shallower, often no more than 3 feet high, and all for coal that loses money. But the Norwegians are much more interested in keeping mines going than making a profit. The presence of 1,200 miners and their families means that Norway maintains a permanent community on the island. But the reasons are political, not economic. Spitsbergen and the other Norwegian islands of Svalbard are strategically vital to the Soviet bloc. They lie at a naval exit point from the Barents Sea to the North Atlantic. And although Norway has been granted sovereignty, the Svalbard Treaty of 1920 permits other countries to exploit the island's natural resources. Only one other country does so, the Soviet Union.
207 Longyear, Roger, wind check. Wind 160 to 2, gusting 30. Report final.
Aeroflot flies in Soviet coal miners direct from the Russian naval base of Murmansk. Skidding into Spitsbergen's icebound airport, these monthly flights have uncontrolled access into the territory of a NATO country. As the aircraft taxis in, a fleet of Soviet helicopters arrives to take the coal workers and their families to their final destination, the Russian mining settlement at Barentsburg. There are no passport formalities and no customs to clear. The Svalbard Treaty guarantees access here that would be unimaginable anywhere else in the world, except Antarctica. And what happens in Spitsbergen today may happen with Antarctic minerals tomorrow. Norway has tried to limit Soviet mining activity in Spitsbergen by declaring highly restrictive environmental regulations. The island's governor, Leis Eldring, claims the authority to impose these regulations, but what he can and can't do is constantly challenged by the Russians.
They have, for example, contended that the environmental regulation is not in accordance with the treaty, which says that you have equal access to economic activities on the archipelago. The main thing for us is not what the Russians are saying, but what they are doing.
Eldring keeps a close watch on what the Russians are doing with regular journeys to Barentsburg. He is met by Soviet consular officials, but he takes his own car into the center of town. It is a journey into a distinctly pre-Gorbachev era. Among the slogans on many of the buildings, there is even a bulletin board celebrating the most productive workers. A small irony in a town which has twice as many people as the Norwegians to produce half as much coal. But it is well understood by Norway that Barentsburg really exists to enhance Soviet positions at one of the gateways from Murmansk to the North Atlantic. Both Norway and the Soviet Union are happy to pay the high price of mining to serve their own national interests. As Antarctica enters the so-called resource age, a similar pattern is beginning to emerge there too. King George Island is rapidly becoming the capital of Antarctica. 9 national research bases are crowded onto a small corner of this rugged outcrop, just north of the Antarctic Peninsula. The impact on the environment is enormous. The Chileans, among the original occupants, are having to extend and repair their busy runway. Bulldozers are reshaping the landscape to accommodate a rash of new buildings. What looks like a frontier town is springing up, and there seems to be no stopping more arrivals. Relations between countries here are good, but gatherings like this one in a Chilean hangar barely disguise new tensions in the Antarctic Treaty. As the bases have grown, so has the wreckage of human occupation. There is now talk among the treaty powers that the overcrowding has got to stop. But so far, say the critics, it is only talk.
It's a bag of hot air, really. You know, they talk all the time about how concerned they are about this overcrowding problem, but they don't really lift a single finger to encourage the new countries not to build the bases on King George Island. I'm unaware of any proposal by a consultative party, for example, to cooperatively use their facilities to carry out research with a smaller country so that we don't have to see these bases built and so forth. So we have a long way to go before that problem is even squarely addressed, I think.
And still they come. January 1988, and the South Koreans arrive at King George Island. The new era in Antarctica is heralded by Hyundai, one of South Korea's biggest manufacturers. A research base is essential for full participation in the Antarctic Treaty. And King George Island is favoured because it is relatively ice-free in the summer months. But the real incentive to be here is that full treaty membership means a place at the negotiating table for the Antarctic Mining Convention. The South Koreans have built their base without any publicly announced scientific program. And the commitment by other new arrivals to do genuine scientific work on King George Island is open to serious doubt. Feeding penguins on an unfamiliar diet of red meat is supposed to give these Uruguayan scientists information on cholesterol levels. Other scientists question why these experiments have to be carried out on penguins or done in Antarctica at all. Another Uruguayan experiment. This time, a completely meaningless study of penguins' reactions to unfamiliar sounds. The Uruguayans were told by other treaty nations not to come to King George Island, but they've built their base here anyway. No one has the power to stop them. At the turn of this century, man had still to break through the ultimate earthly frontier. This was the heroic age of Antarctic conquest, but it was only a partial victory, claiming the lives of Scott and his companions, and destroying Shackleton's ambition to cross the continent with the remorseless crushing of his ship, the Endurance, by the pack ice. Today, Antarctica is more easily tamed, and we now have a real choice to allow Antarctica to remain the last continental wilderness on Earth, or to cross the Rubicon and hunt for the riches of the last frontier.
I feel that Antarctica is a symbol of our age because it is the last great wilderness area on the planet. And in the last 50, 75 years, essentially the 20th century, we have all but destroyed all the other great wilderness areas of the world. This is the last chance mankind has to protect an entire wilderness area.